So, starting onions. So, February is the time when most people are planting seeds for onion starts. And so I did mine here on about the 6th of February. Last year I traditionally have done it around the 14th of the month, right on Valentine's Day. That's the day to start the onions. So I'm starting a little bit earlier this year. They're actually more of a cool weather plant. They can handle a lot of frost. So you can actually set them out in your garden about 6 weeks before the last frost date. So these are what the onion seeds look like. I always thought they kind of looked like pieces of coal or something like that, or gravel. Kind of have that kind of charcoaly black look to them. So why grow onions? Well, onions are a very good food source. They are a vegetable that stores well without preserving it. You can just kind of let it sit in your house, and as long as it's been cured, it will last for quite a while. Depends on the variety, of course, but most of the time they'll last for quite a while. You don't have to, it's not like fruit that goes bad and rots quite readily. They are so they also hold their nutritional value very well compared to other vegetables. So that can be another advantage. And you can produce a lot of food in a small area. So you can get quite a few pounds of onions in a small bed. So they're more nutritious than ones available like on a large farm. So if you grow them yourself, you can get more nutrition in them. And so the cost of an average onion I figured out was about $2. So this is maybe a little bit on the larger side, but this is about £1 1/3. I weighed this out to be, and at about $1.50 a pound, this comes out to be about $2.
So is that organic price? Because I pay like $2 for a 5-pound bag of onions. That's the organic.
I can't remember. I was looking at Safeway or something like that.
Okay, well Safeway's a little more in this. Okay, it was just onions usually aren't quite that expensive.
Yeah, I don't buy them totally, so my pricing may be a little bit off.
Sounds like organic to me.
Yeah.
That's probably right, organic.
So maybe 50 cents or 25 cents an onion, or what do you think an onion might cost?
Yeah, I mean, they're usually, your regular yellow onions are usually 50 cents or less a pound.
Okay.
And anyway, so I was like, wow, there's such prices.
But they're probably organic.
Without actually going to the grocery store and looking it up, I had to look online and get some ideas of what things would cost. So my math will be off, but if you say this is a $2 onion and you grow 500 of them, that means you've made $1,000. So it would cost you $1,000 to buy 500 of them if you can produce that many. Which this year, that's my goal for this year, is to produce 500 of them. Last year I did 200, but my bed was only about 20 feet of that was onions, so get you an idea here. So the nutrition in onions, so they are about 50, for about a cupful of onions, they have about 15 grams of carbohydrates and 1.8 grams of protein and 0.2 grams of fat in them. And they have omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids in them. They have vitamin A, vitamin C, K, B6, thiamine, niacin, folate, and it's another one which I can't pronounce very well, so I will spare you my pronunciations on them, but they're fully good stuff. And they also have calcium and iron, magnesium, phosphorus, potassium, sodium, zinc, copper, selenium, and fluoride, which is surprising. So anyway, they're full of good stuff, full of minerals and vitamins. And so some ways to grow onions. Well, there's 3 different ways that people normally grow onions. So seeds would be one of them, and sets would be another, and starts would be yet another way. And I'll talk about each one here real quick. So this is starting them from seed. So you take the seed from this picture and you plant it into soil. which is here, and slowly they grow up to be good-sized little plants that you can set out. The next type of onion, or way that people grow onions, is to buy what's called starts, or plants. Okay, so these have been started maybe in January or something like that. Seed companies will start them and grow them up in the field, and then they'll harvest them and bundle them up and sell them to you as already half-grown plants. So these don't have bulbs yet, so these just have a little bit of a structure there, kind of like a green onion you see in a store, but just a different variety. So then you set them out in your garden about 6 weeks before the last frost date, and I'll cover some of the actual dates to do these things. But so then the other method is to use what's called sets. So these are little onions that were grown probably as seed in about September of last year, and they grow these up to be until they're about this size, and then they harvest them. They dry them and they store them until springtime, and then they sell them about the time that you normally be planting out your plant starts in the garden, so about 6 weeks before the last frost date. So that's just another method there. So then you plant them out just like that. Probably recommend not burying them too deep. You don't want to constrict the bulb. You want them to just have the roots get established, so save them on the surface and then kind of rake in a little bit of soil around them so that they can, the roots can get wet again. And what's really neat about onions is that the roots, most plants, if the roots dry out, the plant's dead and it's not coming back. But what's neat about these roots is that they will come back. And once they start getting moisture, they'll start growing again. So you can do that. So here's so I'll just tell about some of the advantages and disadvantages of each of these methods here. So there's a cost difference, and there's also a convenience difference. So you may guess, the more convenient, the more expensive, sort of. So in the case of the seeds, they're definitely less expensive. So I calculated I could get seeds, about 100 of seeds, for about 16 cents. And depends on where you buy them, and how many you buy, and what variety, all these other conditions. But the ones I bought for this year came out to be about 16 cents for 100 seeds. Now you're not going to necessarily get 100 plants out of those seeds because some of them won't germinate, so you have to kind of gauge, maybe get it, maybe 60 or so plants out of that, or maybe less than that, but somewhere around there. Anyway, it's quite economical. And then you have the starts. So those come out to be about 15 cents a plant. Price these out from Territorial Seed, which is one there in Roseburg that sells these. So then the sets, bulbs over here, that you can buy, they're about 10 cents a bulb. So they're actually a little more economical than the starts are. And that's mainly because they can store them for a longer period of time. They're such a critical get them out and sold type process. So one of the negatives of the sets is that they tend to bolt. That means the plant goes to seed. Now they're working on different ways to kind of stress these bulbs a little bit, keep them hot for a long period of time in order to cause them to bolt, and the ones that do, they kind of throw out and save the ones that didn't, and that way they won't tend to do that when you actually plant them out. But you never know what you're going to get and what process they used. So they do have a tendency to do that, and that means that you get this really thick stalk coming up the middle of the onion, and even if you cut it off, the onion is just going to continue to grow. It kind of triggers a chemical change in there when it does that, and there's really no way to stop it. Reverse the process and keep it from doing that. So it's just going to keep sending up another shoot when you do that. And that can be a problem mainly for storability. They don't store well, they start to rot pretty quickly once they've bolted. So if you find onions in the store, they generally don't have a green top like this. These are starting to sprout, and I think the main reason why mine are sprouting is because I cut them off too soon. So I'm learning how to cure them correctly so that they don't start sprouting and rotting in the middle. The ones that I grew last year that did have a kind of a stalk coming up the middle that had a flower starting to produce a flower head, those did not keep very well. They're starting to rot in the middle, so that's one of the reasons why you want to be careful of that. So these generally won't do that for you any more than the seeds will. So anyway, those are some of the different characteristics. Oh, yeah, the other advantage of the seeds is that you get a wide variety of varieties that you can choose from. There's hundreds and hundreds of different onion varieties, and you can pick one that you think looks nice, that has good characteristics of storing a long period of time, has different colors or flavors that you like. Generally with the starts, you only get maybe 1-2 different varieties. And the sets are about the same way. You only get maybe up to 5 different varieties to choose from. And they usually are very generic. Long day onion that's yellow and onion maybe, if they even have anything about the flavor. Usually they won't. So that's one advantage of the seeds. You get a way larger variety. So then another characteristic, so when you're buying these, what to look for. So most of the online companies that sell seeds and starts and everything else, even the local one, well, I don't know, the local one should know better. But there's different varieties as far as what they prefer as the day length. So sunrise to sunset time. So right now I think about 10 hours, maybe creeping past that to maybe 11 hours of daylight. So down south they have shorter. As you get closer to the equator, the days get shorter. So short day varieties do well in that climate, but if you plant one of them up here, they won't bulb out usually. They'll kind of stay small and they won't do very well. So then you would want a long day variety, which is 14 to 15 hours during the growing season. They like in order to get bigger bulbs. And then day neutral varieties. So those like any day length. So those will do well up north or down south. So you say, oh, here's a nice variety. It's important to look at what the day length is, so you know if it's going to do well in our area. Seed planting and set out dates. So at this point here, 6 weeks before you would plant it out in your garden, you want to start the seeds. This is for seed starting. And then the date that you set it out is going to be 6 weeks before the last average last spring frost date. Now, if you know what it's going to be, you got more knowledge than I have, because nobody can really predict that last frost date. It's kind of iffy. When you actually, sometimes it's a month before that, we have no frost, and it never does frost after that. And sometimes you get a couple weeks after the average frost date that the frost will come. So it's just, with onions, it's not so critical. With other plants, it is. You set out your tomatoes, and the frost comes, you kind of lost your tomatoes. So anyway, this just gives you a point. It's like, okay, well, we generally start my onions about this time.
So with the starts and the bulbs, how would these time spans fit in? If you're not starting with seed, would you put your starts and your bulbs in?
So right here.
Yes.
Set out date. Yeah, so you do them all at the same time once, because you're basically producing the starts, the little plants. So you get them up to that point, and then they can go out. And that just makes sure the soil's starting to warm up, and biology is starting to work. And you're not like putting them out now where it's just really cold and you're just going to sit there and shiver and it's not going to grow. So you want them to take off and start growing. So usually that would be about March 20 to 30. So the end of March would be your set out date. And then February 6 to 15 would be the normal time that I start mine back here. And then my average spring frost date is about April 24. And I didn't look up what it was here in Albany, but I guess it's probably a week to week and a half or before that, so maybe about the 10th or so of April.
So you start them outside the other seeds or inside?
Inside. So you set them in a windowsill or something like that. I have about, 7 trays. Here's the trays. So when we talk about, so these are normally called flats. You go to a nursery. 10-inch by 20-inch, so they're twice as long as they are wide. And so I have about 7 of these full. And that gives me my 500, plus I have a few extra. Yeah.
So the ones that you have sitting at your window in your house, you take those outside and acclimate them before you put them in the ground, or just from the house to the ground?
Well, I put them out in a little greenhouse, and it's kind of variation of gets kind of hot and gets kind of cold. So they're pretty much acclimated by the time they're ready to go out. They're pretty tough. They can handle pretty much anything. So once they sprout, I put them, I get them up maybe an inch or something like that if they sprout, and then they're off to the greenhouse. So there's that. And some other comments. Make sure the outdoor temperature doesn't drop below 20 degrees. So that's kind of the point where they don't survive out at night. So if you're in the 20s at night, don't set them out yet. Even though you may be at the right date, kind of watch. You look at your forecast for that week and see 30, 37, 38, 40s. It should be probably in the 40s, 42, something like that.
So if
by the time we get
we get a freeze, should you cover them? People cover their tomatoes if there's gonna be a cold night or something.
No, they'll have it. It's just down in the 20s, you get down to 15 degrees, have a really strange winter and it can get super cold. But, and that's mainly a concern for more northerly climates. You get up to Wisconsin and Michigan and, New York, and then you really have to watch it. Be careful because you can have some really cold winters there. Where here we're pretty mild, so don't have to worry about that too much. So also seeds are viable for only a few years. Onions are quite fragile, so about 2 to 3 years, and then they won't germinate anymore. So don't buy too many in advance. So plant spacing. So this is my current spacing that I've been using, and it works quite well. If you have soil that's you're just starting to build up, you may not be able to plant them quite this close. So 6-inch spacing, that means from the center to the center of the next onion. So these circles kind of represent the size of the full-size onion like that. So they have about 1 inch to, these are about 4.5 inches in diameter. I think I calculated to be about 1.5 inches, 1.25 inches, somewhere between the onions when they're full size. So they have, enough room to grow and not bump into each other. The roots have enough space to get their own nutrition. They usually don't have very vast root systems. They're fairly shallow, so that watering is also a consideration. You need to make sure that they don't dry out because they won't do well because they don't have vast root systems to pull water from. Yeah.
How do you keep the weeds out of that? Yeah.
Reach in. When they're small, you can hoe. There's different hoes you can use to get around there and keep them out. But you just kind of have to go out there once a month and get all those weeds out. So it's important not to, there's different methods you can use to alleviate the problem of weeds. I'll cover that in some other meetings. Yeah.
So 5 rows in a 30-inch bed?
Yeah. So this bed would be 2.5 feet or 30 inches wide, Now, some people like 4-foot beds, which I started out doing 4-foot beds, and my back told me that wasn't a good idea. And also some market gardeners recommended the 30 inches, and it has become basically a standard for a lot of farmers to use these 30-inch beds, because they're very easy to work on. You can actually step over on both sides, and you can do work in there, and you can go through your bed, step actually, you know, you should kind of leap a little bit, but you can take a big step and walk through your field and not have to, it's like, well, here's my 4-foot bed, either I'm gonna have to take a big jump or I'm gonna have to go all the way around it. And you certainly learn that going to the end of the bed and then down the next row is a lot of work, so 30 inches becomes very convenient. You aren't actually gonna get as much bed space if you have a big garden and you have a bunch of 30-inch beds as opposed to 4-foot beds. You are losing some bed space. Some people like to do it in rows, you know, single rows. That works as well, but you kind of lose a lot of space that way as well. So then, this is just an easy way for me to calculate how, if I know I have a 20-foot bed, I can go and say, okay, I can multiply it out per foot. 20 times 10, you get 200 onions. So that's just an easy way that you can figure out, okay, well, how many seeds do I need? And that's the question, how many seeds should I buy? And that's one easy way to say, well, how many plants do I need? Well, how many seeds do I need to get that plant? Well, you need about, I do about 3 to 5 seeds to get one plant in each cell to germinate it, because a lot of them won't germinate. And some of them will be what you call scrawny, not some of them that's very sturdy and strong, and others will get nice and big and strong. So when they get to be, maybe 3 inches tall, then you start to weed out the ones that are kind of weak and transplant a few that, if you have some empty cells that just didn't germinate at all, any of them, and you can move some of the healthy ones over. And we'll take another little break here. Does anyone else have any questions or things that they thought about? Yeah.
I had trouble last year with my, the top fall.
Yeah.
What do you do to keep the tops from all?
You don't. And actually, is it towards the end or the beginning?
Towards the end.
Okay, that's a normal thing for them to do, and you actually want to encourage that to happen, because that helps the bulbs to actually get bigger. It kind of cuts the circulation off, and all the plant is now putting all the energies mainly into the bulb area. So in fact, people actually try to bend it over carefully. If you crack it and break it off, it's not usually a good thing, but if you can get it to kink, then that's a good thing. And so even when they're small, they're pretty flexible, and they can still grow, not be a problem. And some people actually like to prune them off. I tried it last year and I haven't found any good success where every time it gets so high, they chop it in half, and then when they grow again, I did it on half my bed, and then the other half I left just full leaves and no change that I could detect. So I didn't find that was a useful practice. We may run into that. So anyway, I like to use these are like called 6-packs, and 72 of these cells will fit in a flat. So that's what I generally start them in, something like that. Just stack them in there like that, and then each one can grow the onions up. Also do what's called bottom watering, and that's a technique where instead of sprinkling them over the surface and having the water seep through and leach out, basically just pour water into, you want the kind without holes for doing that. So this is, I mainly got that because I do a lot inside the house, and it works great in the greenhouse to have holes in the drain in a house. You kind of want to have some sanitary, not leaching out, and have another container underneath to catch the water. So always get the kind without holes. So you basically pour about an inch of water in the bottom of this tray, and then all the dry soil will just kind of wick it up. And you'll watch, and pretty soon the top of the soil becomes damp. And usually it'll suck up most of the water here. If you do only about an inch, for a full tray, it'll actually soak up all that water. And then as the top starts to dry out a little bit, you can just add a little bit more, maybe a quarter inch or so, just enough to bring that back up. So that makes it very efficient. You can just use a watering can without a sprinkler on there, just pour a little bit in there, or a jar or something, yeah.
What type of soil are you using? Is it a potting soil or just dirt?
Well, I've tried all the different things, and just dirt actually works fairly well. I usually use a compost that I've screened. That's kind of a 2-year-old compost. So it's something that's broken down quite heavily, and maybe some of the nutrients have already leached out, so it isn't quite as strong. And seeds really don't need a lot of, a lot of nutrition in the soil, something that's readily available to them. They have a lot of energy within the seed itself. And so you don't need something that's, fresh compost. So I mixed, last year I just kind of used old compost and maybe a little bit of dirt in there, just kind of scraped it off the bottom of my compost pile and screened it out fairly fine. This year I'm mixing in about half peat moss, just to extend it off, because my supply of compost is limited, and my desire to plant more plants is increasing, so the two don't mesh up quite well, so I'm extending my compost. And I have some of the mix here that I use. I can show you guys at the end here. Any other comments, or should we move on? Yeah.
What do you do with 500 onions?
Well, there's lots of church members, and there's lots of food banks that would love to get some onions, so that's my plan, is to give most of them away. And I can handle probably about 250 for our own use.
What variety do you recommend as a keeper? That's a good keeper onion.
So I'm using, one I've done in the past is called Yellow of Parma.
Little Parma.
I have, let me grab my seed real quick. One thing, when you store seeds, refrigerators are wonderful things. Seeds actually like to be the most viable. They like to be at a constant temperature. So as your house goes up and down through that night, that can diminish the lifespan, and also being a little colder helps too. So I keep mine in the refrigerator, just in a cardboard box, or have a bunch of different containers, so quite a few seeds accumulating in the refrigerator. The freezer also works too, so if your freezer has more space, you can use the freezer as well, as long as they're at a constant temperature and kept dry. So Yellow Parma, take a look at this one here. These I got from, where was this? Baker Creek Heirloom is where I got these guys from. There's a rumor that they used to be an Adventist-run company, but I don't think they're that anymore. They have 2 locations, one in Manfield, Missouri, and there's one in California somewhere. But they're quite known for their heirloom varieties. But I got 5,000 seeds for around $8. That's the best deal I can find for these. So that's the variety that I noticed that certain onions that I was growing, I was like, wait a minute, these are keeping really well compared to the other ones. And I was like, okay, what variety is that? So I had to go back and look, and sure enough, it was this variety. And last year I was planning on growing it, but for some reason I made a mistake and got all of the sweet Spanish variety, and those did not keep very well.
That a red?
I think generally your
No,
sweet
it's a yellow
onions-
one.
I think generally the sweet onions don't
Yeah,
as
but
well
a
as
lot of sweets also don't keep very well. So this one particularly I noticed, and I looked it up, and sure enough, it's supposed to keep for 12 months. So that's one of the
Have
better
you tried the
ones.
multiplier onions?
I haven't,
They are great.
yeah.
I've had
nice.
keep in a bucket for like 3 years.
Yeah,
Still firm, slice them up and use them and they're mild.
what size is the bulb one? Just little, like a green onion, or no?
No, they,
So get,
they
okay,
get good.
nice,
And
yeah,
you can only get them in the falls,
okay,
you know, after they've been dug in the field, but you don't start them in.
yeah, that's good. Yeah, one time I took a green onion from the store, we had bought some green onions, and they had the roots and, little bulbs on them, little tiny ones. And I just read that you could chop off the top and plant it, and I did that, and we've had onions for the last, 5 years. So they just kind of keep growing and just kind of chop the tops off, and they don't look too pretty, and they send up new shoots. Onions are really neat the way you chop them off, and they send up new shoots fairly quickly. Chives will do that as well. So if your chives start to look all ratty and tough, you just whack them off the ground level, like mow them off, and they'll send up nice new shoots. They're nice and tender. So good by green onions. And I told that to my aunt one time. She said, "Well, what do you mean you just take the top off? Aren't you supposed to? Then you miss out on the whole bulb." It's like, well, okay, yeah, I get your point. You don't get the bulb part as much. You get half the bulb, but the idea that you can just go out there and chop them off at any time you want to and get one is a really neat idea.
Dan, I think the battery's running low on that power pack.
Okay.
I recognize that sound of the.
It's a little bit.